Let's talk about closing disclosures and why they are incredibly important when getting a mortgage. So listen up, and I'm not kidding. This is the real deal. This is something that's super important. So in the mortgage world, you're going to get two different CDs, closing disclosures. The closing disclosure is what you sign at closing that says, like, here's my payments, here's my rate, here's my closing costs, and it itemizes all the cost and tells you to the penny what amount you need to bring. So that's what the final closing disclosure is. And the reason why this is very important, obviously everybody wants to know exactly what to bring, but you probably won't get the final CD until a day, maybe 2 days before closing. So it kind of stinks. You're like, what is it? What have to bring to closing? The exact amount is going to be to be determined. But the mortgage world is set up to where we should give you really good estimates leading up to it. But here's what's super important. The initial CD. So I said there were two different CDs, the final, which is the exact to the penny numbers you sign at closing. And then the initial CD, mandatory, must, by mortgage law, must be signed by you, the borrower, at least 3 days before closing, if not, farther away from closing or sooner, right? So in other words, if somebody wants to close on a Thursday, they need to have signed their initial CD by Monday night at midnight. So Monday, so 3 days is what I said. So that means if you sign it on Monday at 11:50 p.m., they do count Monday as day one, Tuesday's day two, and Wednesday's day three. So it's 3 days before closing that was signed. And the reason why they required this is back in the mortgage meltdown days, pre-mortgage meltdown. So 06 and before that. So before the mortgage meltdown, there were times, and I was in the industry at that time, we would close loans. No kidding. I once closed a loan, I think in 2 days, maybe 3 days. Days tops. I think maybe, I don't know that I did one in 2, 3 days. So imagine that. Call me, hey, let's do a loan. 3 days later, you're closing. Like, that's ridiculous. And that wasn't common, but it could happen. But during those times, what would happen is a lot of bad actors in the mortgage world would just not show somebody, and they'd show up to closing the day before or the day of closing, having not seen any numbers. And all of a sudden you got, as a home buyer, these big numbers or unexpected numbers, your rate's different, all that stuff. Well, what do? I mean, when you got this like $10,000 earnest money check, you can't necessarily just back out because you picked a bad lender. So the purpose of the initial CD is to open up those conversations and to disclose what we think at that time is going to be accurate information for closing. So the initial CD must be signed. And here's the thing, Sundays and federal holidays don't count. So for example, if you want to close, let's say on a Tuesday, you would have to sign it on Friday by midnight, because signing it on Friday gives you Friday day one, Saturday day two, and Monday day three. And you can then close on Tuesday. If you don't sign it by Friday night, midnight, you're not closing on Tuesday. No matter how much you beg, plead, and want to do it, I can't help you. So the initial CD is super important. So the Mortgage Mark team, we will issue the CD once the loan gets initially approved through underwriting. In most cases, there's some rare exceptions, but the most cases. So we try to do this a week, if not 2 weeks before closing, but at least a week is what we aim for. So we take away a lot of this stress. So you, as the home buyer or homeowner that's going to be refinancing, understand the initial CD is not perfect. We don't know, because we, as the mortgage lender, we don't know all the exact fees and time. I mean, it's the title company's job to do that towards closing. We'll get you close. We'll get you some good numbers. So for what your responsibilities are is to make sure the big stuff's accurate. Make sure the interest rate looks right. Make sure your term, 30-year, 15-year, whatever it is you're doing, kind of make sure the big numbers look right. And if there's a difference, feel free to call us and just say, hey man, what is this? But if it's close, you have to sign it. And understand the initial CD is not contractual. It's not something you're like, oh, well, I don't want to pay this. Just sign the darn thing, because if you don't, we're not closing on time. We have 3 days to fix it. That's the point of this initial CD, is to give you time to have necessary conversations with a mortgage lender or a title company or any other third party to make sure it gets updated and correct. So please sign it. Questions later, sign first. This is not contractually obligating. It's just getting that conversation going to say, here's what we have in our system at this moment. So I know this is a long video for something that's probably pretty quick to say, hey, just sign it. But understand, it is such an important part of the process that you do need to sign it. And certainly if you have questions, call us. And if you're not using us, you should be. But if you're not using the Mortgage Mark team, you can still call us and say, hey, I have questions on this. We're happy to look it over. But the reality is please get your initial C sign and take away all the stress that's going to come with that last minute. Like, hey, I need you to call you at 11:50 at night and get this signed. If you have questions, call us as usual. /share, subscribe. Thanks for watching. And when you think more.